Hello, class. I thought we could continue our discussion on the Civil War. So I thought today we could talk about battles and events of the war. Okay, so we already know about Fort Sumter, the first battle of the war. We know it was Confederate victory. We know the Union surrendered that fort right off the coast of South Carolina until the war started. Let's not talk about that anymore because we've covered it. Thinking back to when distance learning started, I had sent out an activity with the Hampton Roads Ironclad, the Battle of Hampton Roads, which was the battle between the ironclad ships. Remember, ironclad ships are the first boats to be made of iron, covered in iron. We had the USS Monitor, and we had the CSS Virginia. So we had those two ships, both made of iron, attacking each other, and it ended in a draw because when you're shooting cannons at iron ships, you're not really going to do much damage. So ended in a draw. This kind of changed. The reason we're talking about that specific battle is because if you think about how technology changes throughout history, now that they've realized that iron ships are, armored, they're not going to go back and make wooden battleships anymore now that they know that iron ships can be made. So that's going to bring us into this ironclad age. And then after that, you're going to make steel ships. Oh, we call those battleships today. Destroyers, things like that. Cool. All right. Let's talk about some of the battles during the middle of the war. Let's talk about the Battle of Antietam. So the Battle of Antietam was an important battle fought in Maryland. You had Lee as the Confederate general at this battle. You had George McClellan as the Union. That's not that important, but I wanted you to understand that you have Lee already getting the spotlight here. As I said, it's in Maryland. So this was one of these things where Lee accidentally left his battle plan sitting out, and Union soldiers found it. Lee had made a camp, and he had his battle plans, and someone had thrown them away and left them on the ground. And just by chance, someone in the Union, some Union soldiers had found this intelligence, and so they knew where Lee was headed because based on his notes and the maps he left behind, and so they were able to cut him off early. And since the Union forces knew where he was going, they attacked him at Antietam Creek, and this ended up being the bloodiest day in the Civil War. We have 25,000 casualties. Remember, casualties means dead or wounded. So we're going to talk later about Gettysburg being the bloodiest battle, but Gettysburg is going to last more than one day. Gettysburg is basically 3 days of fighting. Antietam is the bloodiest day, single day, 25,000 casualties. So let's go to the Battle of Fredericksburg. The Battle of Fredericksburg was in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And this is one of these battles where we talked last week about the strategy of the Confederacy is to dig in, and the strategy of the Union is the Anaconda Plan. Some of those flip grids I got back from you guys did a really good job of explaining all that. I really appreciate you guys who responded to my flip grid. Really nice job. So at Fredericksburg, you have the Confederates who know the Union are going to attack. You have this guy named Ambrose Burnside, and he has these really long sideburns, and that's it. And so that's actually where we get the name Sideburn from Ambrose Burnside. I'm not sure. I know that that's true, though. I'm not sure why they flipped the word around. But anyways, so Ambrose Burnside is going to lead the Union Army, and he's going to attack these Confederate troops who are already ready for them. They've been dug in. They've pre-sighted all the battlefield. They know exactly, where to position their cannons to make the most damage. They have trenches built. They're behind stone walls. Not Stonewall Jackson, but they're actually behind actual stone walls. And so they get the advantage of having cover and being able to be hidden and being able to be safe while they shoot their guns. While the Union have to attack and run up a hill. We're talking probably a couple hundred yards up this hill, and so they're just out in the open and not hidden behind anything. So of course the advantage here is going to go to the Confederates who are dug in, and again Robert E. Lee is going to command the Confederacy here, and Union forces attempted to assault. They came wave after wave of Union soldiers trying to attack, and like I said, those Confederates just dug in and kept shooting them, and The Union had huge losses, and because it was such a failure, Ambrose Burnside was fired from command. Lincoln fired him because he was, really screwed up that attack. This was a Confederate victory, as you might have guessed. Cool. Let's go with another Confederate victory, probably the most famous. So we have the Union has now put Joseph Hooker in charge, and Robert E. Lee remains in command. But also underneath Robert E. Lee, he has a guy, Stonewall Jackson, and Stonewall Jackson became famous at a battle called Bull Run, which we did a Chief 3000 lesson on, and Stonewall Jackson got his nickname there. And so, because he was so brave and he didn't hide behind anything, and he was a really religious man, and he believed when it was his time to go, it was his time to go, and he didn't ever worry about that. So, having that attitude on the battlefield, he just stood there and surveyed the battlefield under fire, and never ran away, was never scared. So people coined the nickname Stonewall Jackson because he stood there like a stone wall. Okay, so anyways, we have Stonewall Jackson being right underneath Robert E. Lee at this battle, and Stonewall Jackson is going to command a big chunk of the Confederate forces here. So the Confederates know the woods. We've been talking about strategy again, and or advantages, not just strategy, but advantages. And we know one of the advantages that the Confederacy had was, since they're fighting on their home land and their home turf, they know where all the creeks are, they know where all the forests are, and they know where all the shortcuts are. And so the Union, they're just visitors. They're coming down. They don't know where things are. So Stonewall Jackson uses this to his advantage, and he sneaks up on the sleeping Union army. It's real similar to San Jacinto with what Sam Houston did to Santa Anna and the Mexican army in 1836. So, but this is 1863. So Stonewall sneaks up on the Union army that's sleeping, and they successfully put the Union on retreat, and they push them, nearly all the way back to Washington, and they, it's a Confederate victory. Unfortunately, Stonewall Jackson got so obsessed with pushing the Union back after the sun went down and it went dark. He kept pushing his men forward, and he was so far beyond his own lines that his own men mistook him for a Union soldier and shot at him, and they actually shot him in the arm on accident, and they took him to the hospital, and they had to amputate his arm. And while he was in the hospital, because of the stress of the injury, he got pneumonia, and he died in the hospital. So that's the end of Stonewall Jackson. Okay, cool. Let's go to the Battle of Shiloh. Battle of Shiloh, you have Ulysses S. Grant entering the picture here. So Grant's going to be in charge now because Ambrose Burnside failed, Joseph Hooker failed, and now you have Ulysses S. Grant in charge. Confederate generals here are going to be Albert Johnson and General Pierre Beauregard. None of that matters. Okay, it's going to be at Shiloh, Tennessee. This is one of the most famous battles of the war. The Confederates, they lead troops near Tennessee, but Grant was reinforced there, and they fought, and Grant was victorious, a Union victory. Okay, cool. Okay, so we're not only going to talk about battles right now, we're also going to talk about events or documents or anything that comes down, any events that would have happened during the war. So the Emancipation Proclamation was written, and this proclamation was read aloud and distributed in 1863 by Abraham Lincoln. So what is the Emancipation Proclamation? Let's break down those words. Proclamation just means document, or we're moving forward with this legal idea. So legal document. And emancipation means to set free, to emancipate. So the Emancipation Proclamation was Lincoln's attempt to free the slaves. Now let's get real specific here, though. He only freed the slaves through the Emancipation Proclamation. He only freed slaves in the rebellious states, which means the Confederate states. But the Confederacy doesn't recognize Lincoln as their president. So essentially, no slaves were set free when this Emancipation Proclamation was written. So, why does that matter? Well, you think about the border states. Those are slave states that never seceded. So you might ask the question: so were the slaves in the border states set free because of by the Emancipation Proclamation? And the answer is no, because the 5 border states were not rebellious. They did not secede. So those states got to continue owning slaves. So it's kind of confusing. What did the Emancipation Proclamation do? Well, it attempted to free the slaves in the rebellious states, but none of the rebellious states saw Lincoln as an authority figure, so they did not set their slaves free. I'll just leave that there. By this time, by 1863, the whole idea behind Lincoln's presidency, and remember when he ran for president and he won in 1860, he said to the Confederacy, "I'm not trying to get rid of slavery, I just want to stop it from spreading." Well, now he said, forget all that. Now I'm going to try and liberate these slaves. The war has become a war of liberation, freeing slaves. His whole attitude has changed. He's kind of thinking, if these Confederates aren't going to, meet me halfway, then forget it. We'll just do exactly what the people want, and we'll just free slaves. Okay, we'll just do that now. Cool. All right, thanks for watching, guys. There's a quiz, short quiz you need to take after you watch the lecture. Hope everybody's doing good. Hang in there. All right.